You're listening to The View from Up Here, an equipping podcast by Viewpoint Leadership and Development. Our vision is to cultivate a change in the way the world views leadership and development. And our mission is to foster better leaders through a modern approach while developing individuals into their true selves. My name's Brad Walbridge, your host for our time together. And joining me in our conversations is our president and founder, Josh Trout, and our COO, Joel Archeri. Hey, want to welcome back our listeners, our viewers to the View from Up Here podcast. With you as always, I'm Brad, joined by Joel, Josh, and today we have Thornton Kirby. Thornton, welcome.
Thank you.
Thornton is the CEO and president of the South Carolina Hospitals Association, and I wanted to have you just share a little bit with us about what does family life look like, who's at home, and a little bit about how you got connected to the association.
Sure, glad to do that. Thank you for having me. So who's at home? Right now, it's just my wife and I who are at home.
Okay.
We have two kids. They are 22 and 19. The daughter just finished Wofford College in December, and she is a French major, was a French major. She's now in graduate school in France, where she finished the last year and a half of Wofford, and she's in Bordeaux, France, and she is in a Master's in International Business program over there, and having a great time, and has become fluent in French and in all things French, so including wine. She's learning about wine, and she's having a great time. And our son is a freshman at Lander University, and he is big into cars and mountain bikes. He was a national champion downhill mountain biker at 14, so he is big
14.
into the big jumps and going down hills really fast. He goes to ski slopes like Whistler in the summer when there's no snow and just goes top to the bottom. So he lives on the edge a little bit. But he's a great guy. My wife is a nurse by training. She was a hospital administrator. Before you got to the state, Josh, she ran, she was with Greenville Hospital System for a while, then Palmetto Health, opened a hospital in Columbia, and took a few years off when our caring for our kids and her parents who were ill, and now she's back as a labor and delivery nurse in Columbia, delivering babies. So
awesome.
Yeah, having fun.
Helps when your son is into mountain biking.
Yeah, it does.
To have a nurse.
To have a nurse around.
Just in case.
Yeah,
Just
for
in case.
stitches and yeah.
Gosh.
Does she cringe a little bit whenever she watches him compete?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I bet.
Our daughter was a swimmer, so not as many injuries in swimming as in.
A little bit easier to manage.
Yeah, a little
Much
bit
safer
easier.
in the water.
That's exactly
Move
right.
along.
That's right.
So with the association, how did you get connected to, you've been there 18 years, is that right?
This is my 19th. So interestingly, I was a practicing attorney in Columbia with a law firm as a healthcare lawyer working for hospitals like Josh's, and one of our clients was the Hospital Association.
Okay.
And we also gave a lot of time to try to help hospital association issues. And so I knew them, knew a lot of the people there, and worked with the hospital association some, but practiced law for a while, then went to work as a hospital administrator, and eventually came back to this role when this job came open. I can tell you more about that, the details of that if you want, career progression. But so I've known about the hospital association since the late 80s, early 90s.
And what is the association's goal? Like, what is the focus for the association?
That's a great question. The Hospital Association is the collective voice for hospitals in the state. All the hospitals in the state are members, and our role is to work with the state's General Assembly, the governor, all his cabinet agencies, the regulatory agencies, and communicate on behalf of hospitals. It's not efficient for Josh and his team to have to go to the State House every time somebody talks about a healthcare issue.
Right.
And that over the last 4 or 5 decades, that's just multiplied. He would have someone there every day in the state agencies and the State House. So that's what all states use their hospital associations for. There is a national organization called the American Hospital Association, just like the American Medical or Nursing Association. So we all do the same thing. We represent the industry to policymakers and regulatory agencies.
Yeah. In doing the research, I noticed that there is a primary focus for representing the hospitals, but also a focus on the patient care, like the advising of and the advocating of how patients are cared for. And I feel like that would be a delicate balance because hospitals want to care for people, but they do need to have the finances to be able to do that, but also people need care. and the standards with which to be able to care for people well.
That's
And-
right.
And the balancing between that. So
You're exactly right. The way a lot of hospitals have summarized that over the years is we are in a mission business. We take care of people.
Right.
But there's no mission without money. You have to. It's a business, and you have to have the two. So this nation, like all developed nations, is constantly balancing how much money are we going to spend on healthcare for the level of services we want to see our population have. And so I feel like my role, the Hospital Association's role, is really at the intersection of caregiving and policy making. So I don't do either one of them. I'm not the caregiver, I'm not the policy maker, but we've got to make sure there's a conversation going on and that those two things are linked appropriately. Now, you mentioned patients. I would be remiss if I didn't say the reason I get up and go to work every day is not because I want to engage in political debates in the State House. It's more because people like Josh and his colleagues are willing and desirous of improving care for their patients. And there's so many ways that we could work better together to improve handoffs, transitions between care, learning from each other how we are treating certain diseases. There's so many ways to improve care. South Carolina's hospitals actually have become, in the last decade or two, national leaders in improvement of quality and safety of care. We have a zero harm initiative that I think is the most robust in the country, where we are focused on making sure that we don't do anything that causes harm to patients. And, that it sounds kind of obvious, right? But healthcare is a very complex endeavor, and each person is different. It's not like working on a car. So the challenges in getting it right every time are pretty significant, and our hospitals are really working hard to remove errors in care. So we're really proud of that. That's what gets me up in the morning, makes me want to go to the workplace, is the desire to make care better. And we are, for example, we were national leaders in improving heart attack care, in reducing surgical harm. There are so many things we've done that I'm proud of that really aren't government related.
Right.
So
with the complexities of all that, both on the working with government side, working with hospitals, driving those initiatives, what have you feel like over the 19 years that you've been in your leadership role? How have you been able to balance all of that, the tension of all of those pieces coming together and the complexities of all that? So like your leadership style through that, is it that you're a relational leader? Is it you're a driving leader? How would you unpack your leadership style?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I am very much a relational leader and a consensus leader. Yeah, I mean, this is the right state to be a relational leader, right? We were talking about this before.
Amen. Yeah.
This state is big enough to be a meaningful place to experiment and learn for 5 million people, but it's small enough for people to know each other and have personal relationships.
Sure. Yeah.
So relationships are key. I feel like my job, on behalf of Josh and his colleagues, is to represent them and their interests and their patients' interests to the state, business, government, and whatever, but also to create a sense of community among Josh and his colleagues so that we can pick up the phone and call each other and we're not strangers to each other.
Right.
Yeah.
That is critically important during a hurricane, for example.
Sure. Yeah.
When we got to get people off the coast. I've got a rehab hospital on the coast, and they need to get their patients out of harm's way. I need them to be able to call Josh and say, "Hey, Josh, I need 5 beds." And Josh is like, "I got you covered."
Yeah.
This is not a stranger calling a stranger. This is somebody who knows someone else. So that's part of it. But I also think if there's one thing that we mentioned before, it's patient-centeredness. We are not in the business of making money as hospitals. We're in the business of taking care of people, human beings. And the hardest things we've had to deal with have been easiest to solve when we have kept our eye on the patient. What is in the patient's best interest? And Josh and his colleagues, they all are in business. It's kind of cooperative competition, It's coopetition, if you want to.
I like it.
But when you talk about patients, there is no competition in that. It's what is best for patients, and that is what I love most about this hospital community. They're going to do what's right for patients, and then compete after that.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Well said.
That's part of my job, is to keep inculcating that kind of mindset.
Yeah. Josh, from your standpoint in your role,
Yeah.
how has that relationship, how has that impacted you
And really even your staff.
Yeah,
in that
tremendous.
environment.
You know, first of all, from a leadership perspective, yeah, relational without a doubt, but also connector. I would
Yeah.
say connectors, you know, for you as an individual, but obviously for your role, you know, the connector piece has been very beneficial, not only through Thornton, but through the association itself. You know, coming into South Carolina from Pennsylvania, building a physical hospital, right, then building a team. There's the main parts of the job that you got to do on a day in and day out, but we started from scratch, right? And that just brings a whole different level of challenges. And I could tell you that it would not have been is smooth, or we would not have been as successful without the association. Because exactly with the association, but specifically your leadership, having that person I can text or have a call and say, I got a question or I need help, you're absolutely right. It's nice that you have connected us all. And some of us are competitors, like you've said, right? But we're there for each other when that time's needed. And I feel like you guys are the glue, right? So the association plays such a vital role in our healthcare system locally.
What advocacy are you looking for most in your position for the association to be the voice up for you on a daily basis?
I mean, there's a lot. You know, currently, you know, we're talking about the CON, right? Their certificate of need. So that's, you know, a process on, you just can't come into a state that has a CON and just build 15 hospitals if you want. There has to be a need for that, and there's a lot going on in the state right now with that. And you know, we've been blessed to build this hospital, and so quickly we need to expand.
Yeah.
You know, so working on getting those you know, expanded beds is something that I'm currently in the process, and Thornton's been a great advocate for that and talking through that. And there's a lot of benefits to the CON, and there's some that, you know, there's some things that make things a little bit harder, but we can't, like Thornton mentioned, I can't go and fight for that.
Right.
I just can't do it. We don't have the time, the resources where the association has that, and they advocate for us. But again, no matter what, we all have different interests, right, in what we got to do and our ultimate goal. But they're able to kind of take those pieces and advocate for us, but also keep what's best in mind for the state and for the citizens of the state, not just because we want to grow. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I can't do that. I can't do that by myself. That's where
if I had to answer the question for all his peers, I would say they generally want to make sure that the state's laws and policies and regulations don't interfere with their ability to give the best care.
Right.
And as care evolves, sometimes the old laws are not appropriate anymore.
Right.
Sometimes new laws are needed, so that's piece of it. And then also to make sure that they are paid fairly.
Yeah.
Because a very large percentage of all the patients that are served in this country by hospitals are paid for by the government. Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, VA. There are just so many forms of insurance that are essentially run by the government, the state health plan, for example. So talking about that is a big piece of it as well.
And what's sad about that is a lot of those things that you mentioned, they don't have equal rights to all levels of care.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another place where they really come in and help out. You know, Medicaid patients, they're not able to usually get rehab services because they don't pay for that. Guess what? Most of the patients that need to be in inpatient rehab have Medicaid. Right. So that's where, you know, again, that advocacy really helps out with trying to get, again, it's about the patient first. How can we get everybody the accessibility to the care they deserve?
Yeah.
Yeah, sometime in a future podcast, it might be useful. I've got a talk that people really love. It's about the history of our health policy in this country, how we built this from the Second World War forward. And it's really fun to unpack and to understand. And you never hear about it from policymakers. You never hear about it from the media. You don't know that our healthcare system really came out of the Second World War, out of the end of the war, and how we built it from there. And it was all, in my view, the government solving near-term problems, and they solved this problem, and then it just eventually becomes this patchwork quilt. But it was not built as a comprehensive model that's supposed to work together seamlessly. It was all kind of add-on, you know, like a home that's had 15 different owners put different things on it.
Yeah.
The net result of it is that we are very different than every other developed nation in the world in one regard. And the simple way to think about it is this. In America, if you have insurance, generally speaking, if your physician says something is medically necessary, it will be covered. But not everybody has insurance. All right, so the rest of the developed world says we cover everybody, but not everything. And in the U.S., we say we cover everything, but not everybody. That is the simplest way to understand.
That's a great way of looking at it.
How what Josh just said.
I think that just took a lot of years of me trying to figure out all in one conversation.
Which is so funny because I was going to ask a question. You have a daughter who is now living in France, and a lot of the conversations of people her age and younger is healthcare, difference between America and the rest of the world. And I was going to say, what do you think about that? Well, what's one of our strengths? And you went,
well, interestingly, she just had her wisdom teeth taken out.
In France?
Yeah.
Okay.
And as I said, her boyfriend is a young surgeon.
Was he the one to do it? Okay,
No,
I was about to say, isn't there like a conflict of interest there?
No. He had a friend who did it but the thing that was interesting is they do not send patients home with strong pain medicines. That is opioids are a major problem in this country.
Crisis. Major.
She had her teeth out, and so our my wife and I asked her, how's your pain management? There were 4 impacted wisdom teeth, and so sometimes that hurts.
Sure.
She said, I was okay. I just had ibuprofen one day, and then I was good. But she said, she's got a really wicked sense of humor. She said, over here, they don't send you home with meds. They give you some applesauce and a pep talk and wish you luck.
That's wild.
Applesauce and a pep talk.
Yeah.
That's how we need it. That sounds like a Southern person. Like, I just gave her an applesauce and pep talk. And be like, you go to school. You're all right.
But they do not send narcotics home.
Yeah. Wow.
You cannot get narcotics. If you need narcotics, you stay in the hospital until you don't need narcotics anymore.
Yeah.
So you contrast that. We as Americans tend to look down on a lot of other nations' healthcare systems. I don't know that that's rational if we really unpacked them.
I mean, where are we ranked right now? It's not that great.
We're getting real in this podcast.
We sure are.
Shortest life expectancy, poorest health on the way to our earlier demise than any of the other developed nations.
We're not that great.
We're really good at rescue
be.
care.
Yeah.
Okay. What we want as Americans is to be able to live however we want.
And then if
don't mess
something
with
happens,
me. I'm gonna smoke while I'm riding my motorcycle without a helmet, and don't tell me I can't. But something happens to me, somebody better come in here and fix it right now.
Wow.
The rest of the world is like, you need to take care of yourself. We'll help you stay healthy. If you need a hip replacement, you may have to wait on it a while.
Yeah.
Or if you want a knee replacement, you need to pay cash for that. So we have a different view of it. But I would just say that, as in so many things, it's dangerous to think that your way is always the best. We really need to learn from others. I actually we were talking about Australia before this podcast. They have some models that make more sense than ours. They put everybody on government insurance. They actually call it Medicare, and then but it doesn't cover everything. And if you want more than that, you buy more. Buy insurance on top of it. It's
interesting.
Yeah. But everybody in the country has basic access to care.
Right.
So every Western nation and their policymakers have to put their heads on the pillow at night and be able to sleep. Most nations say, we're going to cover everybody up to a point, and beyond that, we just can't afford to give them everything.
Right.
Our nation says, we're not doing it that way. People who don't have insurance just need to go to the emergency room. As a result, our nation deposits a lot of its societal problems in the emergency room. If you guys want to come see the opioids, the child abuse, all the problems of our society, that's a place to see it, mental health and other things. So we just have gone about it a different way. Series of unrelated policy decisions have produced this patchwork quilt, and it's pretty hard to tease out. You got a lot of entrenched interests and politics in it.
Yeah. I think for our listeners and our viewers, I think that from a leadership perspective, they could hear you talk about all of that and even not pay attention to the fact that, like, they may assume that with you working with the hospital association, that all of that is just done from an office, and you hear from people like Josh and his colleagues, and you take all that information, and then you go about working with lawmakers and working with other organizations. But I would imagine your role really needs to be a boots on the ground role. What does that look like for you to be in hospitals? And because you're not operating, you're not running a hospital.
That's right.
But what does it look like to be on the ground with Josh and his colleagues?
Well, first of all, my background helps. Okay, so we haven't really talked about that, but I'll tell you, I studied government at the University of Virginia, And then I went to law school at South Carolina and became a healthcare attorney. So I represented hospitals. One of those hospitals, Toomey Healthcare System in Sumter, now part of Prisma Health, recruited me to go to work in their administration. So I spent 3 years as what is effectively a chief operating officer, had all the non-nursing units that reported to me, emergency room, surgery, dietary, housekeeping, EMS, physician recruitment, all that kind of stuff. So when I talked to Josh, that background really helps me understand, I've recruited doctors.
Yeah.
I've worried about whether you have coverage for the staff on the unit. So that background, it's pretty tough for some of my peers around the country to be effective advocates when they don't really understand what it's like to help run a hospital.
Right.
But I do have to get out and go sit down with Josh and say, all right, what's going on? What are you worried about? And they are all worried, not surprisingly, about their ability to recruit staff. That is a national problem in many industries.
Yeah.
But that being on the road, also meeting with my peers around the country is an important thing to hear. What are the regional differences? What are the priorities? Are we like other states? Or are we unlike other states? And on most issues, healthcare in most states is very similar, though we are in a non-union state, and that, I think, makes life simpler here because the union activity in a lot of the states is just complicates the ability to run a
Something that's
healthcare
already
delivery
too
system.
complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about your background. Can you unpack that a little bit more for us? How
Sure.
you, even with the association, the ways in which influences on your leadership style. What does that look like over the years? I know that you had interned for Strom Thurmond, and just some of that background that has built up your leadership style over the years.
And even real quick too, if you can hit on, I know you did some stuff with Clemson. At some point, because from a development side of things too.
I worked there. I'll unpack that. So I was born in New York City. Even though both my parents were Southerners, they met in New York. My dad was an FBI agent working for Hoover after the Second World War. He was a Cold War. I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie Bridge of Spies with Tom Hanks. My dad, that Russian spy, my dad arrested that spy.
What?
And I heard that story when I was little, but when the movie came out, I was like, oh, wait.
Yeah, that
Look
sounds
at
familiar.
that.
You're actually kind of cool, Dad. So I was born up there. We came back here when I was 2. I grew up in Columbia and went to University of Virginia for undergrad. Thought I was going to be a doctor. I started out as a chemistry major. First semester, I was like, what am I thinking? I don't love this stuff. And switched to government, American government, which was a cool thing to study at UVA, which is kind of a core institution of our nation, founded by Mr. Jefferson. But then I came back to law school at South Carolina, and I found that I really enjoyed the healthcare issues. And so I did get to work in healthcare, just not as a clinician. And I was really pleased to do that. So I practiced law 3 years. And one of the big areas for me, I didn't go to court. I was all about helping people like Josh. They would call me and say, I've got this problem. How do I sort that out? So it was giving advice. And I learned our firm was called Nexon Pruitt. It just merged, is now Maynard Nexon. But our business card said attorneys and counselors in law. And I wondered, so what's the distinction? Attorney is someone who speaks on behalf of another, and a counselor is somebody who gives advice, right? So I realized, okay, well, I'm one of the counselors because I'm not going to court for these organizations. But I would, give that kind of advice. And a lot of what I did in my career was with death and dying because that was a major innovation from the Supreme Court. There was a case of Nancy Cruzan whose parents wanted to discontinue her care. She was on life support and had no prospect of ever surviving, but she was young and would stay on life support for years. So the law changed, and that became something that I was to learn and advise hospitals and physicians and nurses about. So that was really helpful. So as a young person, I learned a lot about death and dying, which most young people don't contend with very much, and you know that as a pastor. Most of us don't like to think about it at all, ever, but that was a big piece. Then I went to work at one of my clients, I mentioned that earlier, a hospital over in Sumter, and they gave me an opportunity eventually to manage many of the parts of the hospital, and I grew a lot from that. The CEO there taught me great lessons. He had been my client at the law firm. Now he was my boss at the hospital. He taught me, for example, the platinum rule. You've heard of the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
I'm intrigued. The
platinum rule is do unto others as they want done unto them. Not as you would want done unto you, but as they want.
Once again, everyone.
Okay.
It was
We're learning so
powerful,
much.
He's like and I think that was kind of a foreshadowing of what we're dealing with now in terms of the fact that we are so much more diverse as a country or as a region than we might have been 20 or 30 years ago. So our hospitals see people who are from different cultures and
everywhere.
What is it that they care about? It may not be what we care about. So you really need to ask them, what's most important to you? And I think one of the big advances in patient care in the last few years has been a greater willingness for the medical community to say, we're not just going to do everything that we think could be done medically for you. Tell us what is important to you. Do you want to make it to your grandson's wedding? Are you trying to get back to your normal capacity? What's important? What do you want? Let us help you accomplish that. You're not like our ward, and we will do what we think we need to do to you. You need to tell us what's important.
Right.
And so he kind of foreshadowed that. Then I'd been there a couple of years, and one of our physicians there was a board member at Clemson, and he. It's funny, we were talking about faith issues. I had just prayed the night before for a variety of reasons that I want to be wherever the Lord wants me to be and whoever wants me to be with. The next day, this physician comes to me and says, have you ever thought about working at Clemson? I grew up in Columbia, cheered against Clemson. I went to UVA, cheered against Clemson. I went to South Carolina Law School, cheered against Clemson.
God has this funny
He has
sense
a
of humor.
wicked sense of humor. Right? So I thought, wait, seriously? And
From Cavs to Tigers.
Yeah, no doubt. So I ended up working at Clemson. I was the secretary of the board of trustees there for 8 years and worked with President Jim Barker. It was an extraordinary experience. They made me part of the Clemson family. I am definitely part of the Clemson family now and love it. But I got tremendous experience working with a very high-profile board and some great business leaders. And that was great. I got to see state government in action. I got to see higher ed in action. And then after 8 years there, the CEO I had worked for at the hospital, who had been my client in my first job, he was the chairman of the board of the hospital association when this job came open, and he said, you should apply for this. So I credit him with 3 of my 4 roles.
Wow.
He had a hand in and is still a great friend. But so for me, the government major, hospital attorney, hospital administrator, worked in state government, it really kind of all comes together for me, and that's why I have not left. It is it's kind of a perfect combination of background for the job that the hospital association needs.
That's awesome.
And again, relationships. You as a relational leader, and growing under various leaders. Having those relationships leads to some of the roles that you've had.
Oh, no
Several
question.
of the roles that
No
you've
question.
had. I just think it's important for people to understand that while we are professionals, we have a professional responsibility. Our relationships come with us, and what we decide to invest in those relationships or not invest in those relationships.
Oh, there's no question. I meet with a lot of young people, in the last few years, a lot of people who are studying health administration. They want to know, give me advice about getting a job. And one of the things I tell them is everything you do every day is watched by a lot of people. And you never know who is going to hire you in the future. So treat everybody you work with as if they may be able to offer you a job. And the converse is true. If you loaf one day and don't show up, somebody who could have hired you is not going to have you on their radar screen.
That's right.
Very true.
That's right.
So, no, I didn't mean to cut you off. No, I was going to say, what we do with Viewpoint, we often, when we're doing sessions with people like we did with Adam Toma in the podcast before this, is we ask, what drives you? So one of the things you talked about was what you've been doing, your background, how you ended up where you are. But through all of that, there's one of the most connective tissues is you as a person. So what has driven you all these years to continue to walk into these opportunities that, like you said, this one guy helped you basically get 3 of the roles that you've been in. But what's driven you to continue to keep those feet walking forward?
Yeah, like those like guiding principles
Yeah.
that guide you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the lessons I learned working in the hospital is that thought leaders drive organizations. And so, I have learned to look for thought leaders. Like as a lawyer, typically you think, all right, how many people do I need to vote for something to make it go forward? I need a simple majority. It's 50% plus 1.
Yeah.
What I learned in the hospital working with a medical staff is you don't need 50% plus 1. You need the 5 or 10 people who really make the group go.
Yes.
Yeah.
People who enjoy incredible respect among their peers, they are the thought leaders. So that's been one of the guiding principles. Another one is I want to make a difference in the community, and everybody can do that in their own way, right? And so for me, it has been the ability to work in healthcare. Now, Josh and I think we'd both say, man, healthcare has a lot of problems, and hospitals are not perfect organizations. No. We do not always get it right. But I get up every day knowing that we go to work to help people in our community in one of their times of greatest need. So the days that I think, oh man, it's hard representing hospitals, I ask myself, would we be better off without them?
Ooh.
Absolutely not. So we just have to keep trying to get better and better and better. And it's a human endeavor to take care of people, and it's going to be imperfect, right? So we just have to keep focusing on improvement.
Love that.
So those are some of the things that I also think, there are some quotes that I like. People may not remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Yep.
I think that's really important, how you
true.
treat people. And there's another thing that I learned when I was at Clemson, and that is the concept of a vacuum of leadership. Nature abhors a vacuum, right?
Right.
Well, I would tweak that and say human nature abhors a leadership vacuum. When there is an obvious need for somebody to lead, and the person who's supposed to be leading doesn't,
Oh, yeah.
somebody else is going to step in there.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
And so you've seen that with
Oh, yeah.
board. I
Yeah.
mean, if Josh needs to address something at his place and he doesn't, and he lets it go long enough,
Yep.
somebody else is going to jump in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe his boss, maybe a board, it may be his team. So development of leaders is just so important. And you guys talk about that in this podcast about leadership and development of people. But, I think if you have the ability to lead, you got to engage and try to make a difference in your community. So those are some of the things
So to add on to that, so you're in a very unique position because you get to see and interact with many different types of leaders within the state, right? And we are in such a vital time, I would say, in our healthcare world, right? In the healthcare systems, we're really struggling with many different things, and the pandemic has just completely exposed that even more than anything. And I think it's so important because we're a struggling field to keep people, let alone recruit new people. And I think that we look at things in all different ways, but I really think it comes down to the leadership. How, like you said, how do you make someone feel? So looking at it from a healthcare perspective, from a health system perspective, for a new person trying to come in and work there, they want to feel like they are somebody, like they have a voice, like that there's a positive culture, that they feel safe. So I would like to know from you, because you get to interact with so many different leaders, what are some things that you see in some of your local leaders that are successful, and what are some of those things that are not?
Man, that's a great question.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I think one of the...
Hopefully I'm on the good side of that.
Yeah, you are.
Was that you asking about yourself?
Take that question back.
There's
I
a
don't want you to
guy
answer that.
at the Encompass Hospital in Greenville. Awesome. Absolutely awesome.
I was hoping you would go there with the accent.
Steve Irwin there.
He's a little ripper. No, I think that I think the best leaders, number one, you got to set a vision for the organization. People have to believe in that vision. You got to bring them along. Yeah. But secondly, they got to feel like they have a role to play and a part in that accomplishment of that vision. And that is a constant body of work, keeping people on the team who engaged in the vision and seeing. And I think that's one of the goals of leaders, is to keep reminding people, hey, today is hard, and you're dealing with a patient today who's difficult and giving you a lot of grief and all. But remember why we're here. We're here to restore people to function in a rehab
Absolutely.
hospital. So what's the vision? Another thing is to make people, I think, feel as though they can grow and are fulfilled. And that's been kind of challenging, I think, for people in my generation. I don't feel old, but I watch some of the people coming out of school, and there are people who feel like I really should be a vice president pretty soon,
Yeah.
And
Don't look at me. Listen here.
I'm not looking at you, but we talk about that a lot.
We do talk about that a
to
lot.
manage expectations. I mean, a lot of people who are in senior leadership roles worked a long time to get there. Now, when I was young, I used to think, man, why I want to do that. Well, I'm getting a chance to do a lot of that now, but it takes time and it takes experience and leadership. Best leaders are seasoned individuals, and they're seasoned with failure, and they learn from failure. And it's not just
Stop looking at
a
me.
bunch of success.
But there are scars.
Yeah.
Like they have scars
Yeah.
that they're able to say,
Yeah.
hey, this is how I got that one.
Yeah.
This is how I got that one.
Exactly.
They can share the story and be able to give that
Correct.
understanding and example from their life.
And they learn from
Absolutely.
from everything they do, successes and
Yeah.
failures. Those are some of the things. I mean, I think great leaders share credit widely and take the blame themselves. There's nothing better at building loyalty from your team than if Josh screws up and I take the blame for that. Man, he's going to remember that forever.
Absolutely.
He is
Absolutely.
never going to. He's always going to have my back.
Yes.
Right.
Because he knows. He was the one who.
Yeah.
But I took that for him.
Yeah.
And one of the lessons I've learned from a really good friend, one of my career mentors, is that you earn the right to fail. So you got to put deposits in the bank, and in terms of your brand.
Yes.
And when you do, you got a little bit more room to take risks because you're not going to get fired the day that something happens that didn't go the way you want.
Right.
And this is an environment in which the status quo is, or what was done in the past is not the template for how to succeed in the
Yeah.
future. So
Yes.
you don't want to be paralyzed. You don't want to be stupid and make dumb mistakes, but you don't want to be paralyzed. So there are a lot more people taking chances that they might not have taken in the past because there is no obvious answer,
Yeah.
right or
Right.
wrong. So
Sure.
let's try
It's a very
something.
good point.
And those are a couple of observations I've seen with
Great. Yeah.
leadership.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also really appreciate the fact that you're able to communicate for Josh how to say Clemson, because he says Clemson
With a Z.
Clemson.
with a Z.
He could be on a national telecast then, because
Yeah.
that's what a lot of those guys. Clemson, the Clemson Tigers.
Yeah, but you give it that you put
It's
that
a
P in
PS,
there,
baby. Clemson.
Clemson.
Oh, Clemson.
Love it.
Also, like Jill.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you please
Jewel.
learn how to say my name?
Jewel.
We've been in partnership this long.
that Pennsylvania.
From Western
draw.
Pennsylvania.
Well, I wanted to affirm you, Thornton, because it's obvious that the reason you're successful is that you've lived all these things that you're saying, all the quotes, all the little
Right.
kind of piffy sayings that you've been saying in your life. And even as a father, it's very evident too that you've been doing that too, because your kids would not be in the position they are and where they're at now without you being that in their lives and being able to own, like you said, taking the blame, owning yourself, letting them have those opportunities to fail safely, and then living with integrity. And so it's really cool to see. And I hope that people are listening can see it too, that yes, it does take a while sometimes to get to where you may want to go eventually, but
Right.
if you live in such a way that Thornton does, you will eventually get there if that's your goal, because those who live with integrity and that character and live for the higher calling that you do with your faith, that they will eventually be put in those positions, because those are the people that people want to lead. You want that balanced, stable man of integrity in your leadership, not the person that cares about themselves and their self-interest. So just an affirmation
Well,
to
that's
you.
really kind of you to say that. And I do agree that there may be no more important thing for a leader to have than integrity. If you don't have that, then you have no keel.
Say it again for them. They need to know
The
that.
most important thing you need to have as a leader is
I love it.
integrity.
A little
Absolutely.
Trump there. A little,
Oh,
As
And I'm the one, the most integritous person here.
Not gonna do it. No.
That was Dana Carvey.
That's
You know,
right.
George-
What
George
Nailed
W.
it.
Bush. Yeah.
Nailed it right there.
Yeah. One of the things to reinforce that, I remember my first year practicing law, I watched the partner I worked for go to board meetings at hospitals, and I thought, man, I wish I were going to board meetings. But I wasn't invited to the board meeting, so I just kept doing what I was doing. Well, board service has become a huge part of my career. I have served on more than 50 boards. I have advised dozens more. So if you work for it, but the first boards I was on were maybe, my local homeowners association or my UVA alumni association in the community, and eventually a board, that was business oriented, and then more and more and more. And when you learn the discipline and you learn how to do it and you do it with integrity, people say, hey, that's somebody I need on whatever. So you don't go from never having done it to doing it at the highest level.
Yep.
This is like athletics, right? Every kid a lot of kids wish they could play pro sports.
Right.
Yeah, because the truth is that person that wants to be in that spot and doesn't want to do anything in between, when they get into that room, if that were to happen, they would fall apart.
They are not equipped.
They're not equipped. Yep.
Because it takes all the scars and the experience
those failures
to be able to.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yeah,
rightfully
right.
so.
Yeah.
Well, how can they learn more about what you're doing and about the association? If any of our listeners or our viewers want to do that.
Well, they can go to our website. It's SCHA.org, South Carolina Hospital Association, SCHA.org. And our mission, our members, all that's described on there. You can find a hospital if you need to find one close to you. And of course, you can always call us. We'll help you find if you need care. But that's how you can do that.
That's great. Well, Thornton, thanks for being with us and sharing some laughs, but also sharing some wisdom that I think our listeners and our viewers can really pull from and apply to what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And thank you to Sit and Spin Studios, our sponsor for today's podcast, for their wonderful studio. Great service, even you in the back. Wonderful job. But thank you so much for Sit and Spin Studios for hosting us. Hey, subscribe. If you're not subscribed, click the notification bell on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed so you can hear more amazing people like Thornton.
And we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
See y'all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.